Hello, this is Ali with the Perception Trainers, author of The Perception Diet, and today I have a special Perception Trainers video episode for you where I am going to attempt to unify the entire self-love message or process that I have been talking about in all the Perception Trainers videos as a way of just kind of trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together for this sort of part of the journey to help you see the broader context of what I'm talking about and how this self-love work applies to absolutely everything in your life and how it is the next evolution on everything that's occurring on the planet right now. All right, so I know that in a lot of my videos I have sort of bad-mouthed the self-improvement path. And in this video, I'm going to explain why the self-love path is not at all a rejection of the self-improvement path, but rather it is an evolution of the self-improvement path and how we evolve it and why we want to evolve it and how radical this self-love path is. Okay? So, in the beginning, the reason any one of us, the reason you have ever pursued self-improvement or spirituality or health or any of these modalities of tuning into the self and changing how the self is was because of one thing and one thing only. And that was you became aware of your suffering and you became aware of the idea that there was something that you could do about your suffering. This is why we get into this, all right? So if we understand this as the main base concept, we are all becoming aware of our suffering and at the same time awakening to the idea that there's something we can do about our suffering. That is why we start on the self-improvement, spirituality, health, nutrition, wellness, self-love, pseudo-self-love path in the beginning, all right? And so first things first is we want to acknowledge, yes, that as we move into the self-love path, what we're really doing is acknowledging the wisdom in everything, acknowledging that there are no wrong or bad parts, that we're simply putting the pieces of the puzzle together, okay? So this first piece of the puzzle is that understanding that I am suffering and there's something I can do about it was wisdom. Now, we all then go into this thing that either, and it's going to be two sides of the same coin, okay? We're all going to start to look into and try and figure out what parts of the self are the thing that's causing my suffering and what parts of the reality are the thing that is causing my suffering. And then in our innocent, absolutely lovely, absolutely makes perfect sense attempt at eradicating our suffering, we are going to attempt to get rid of that which we perceive to be the cause of our suffering. All right? So that is step 2 on our self-improvement, usually, path. I'm suffering. I don't like that I'm suffering. I want to do something about my suffering. I'm going to figure out what it is that's causing my suffering, and I'm going to get rid of it. And then this is where we start to identify aspects of self or aspects of the reality that we perceive ourselves to be victim to, that are causing us our suffering, that we need to get rid of. Okay? So this is where we start to see our self-sabotaging behaviors, what we would call the inner saboteur, the thing that we think is holding us back from becoming our highest, most advanced, amazing, blissed out, awesome self. The things in our reality that we think are holding us back, so the people, the circumstances, the way life is, the way reality is going, that essentially what we're doing here, okay, so the wisdom in this is that we see that there's a vision or a feeling of how we're supposed to feel, or a vision of how we're supposed to be, right? This non-suffering version of myself. You see, this is the real root of this. This non-suffering version of myself. That's what we really mean when we say our higher self, or our healed self, or our best self, or our enlightened self, or our self that loves ourselves. What we're really saying is, I want to become the version of myself that's no longer suffering, that's no longer in pain. That's what we want, right? I am suffering. There's something in the way that's causing my suffering. If I eradicate that thing, I will become the person who isn't suffering anymore. That's what we really want. We want to end suffering. Now, there's wisdom in that, okay? Because, and I'm going to just throw out this universal concept. When we are truly in alignment with reality, and when we are truly in alignment with ourselves, we do not suffer, okay? We suffer because we are opposing life on some level. We cause ourselves pain when we oppose life. We cause ourselves to suffer when we continue to oppose life, okay? Pain is the first time we oppose life. Suffering is when we continue to oppose life. So we suffer because in our culture and as babies, and we come in, right, not fully understanding how the reality works. We have an intelligence that thinks it knows. We have an awareness that's beyond our experience. All of us have this, okay? We call this intuition, we call this insight, we call these things spiritual gifts in some people. It doesn't really matter what we call it. It's all just information beyond experience that we've had, okay? However, we then have a 3D Earth experience that conflicts with our idea of how reality should be. So we're born into families that don't accept who we are. We go through experiences where people hurt us and we're not unified. And essentially, right, we are immersed in a separation experience that our souls have no experience with. They don't understand it, right? Because, and this is another kind of big concept, but we're just going to throw it out there, right? Consciousness already knew itself as a unified being. It already had that information. Anything that's living must be learning, growing, changing, evolving, expanding. Consciousness as a whole, in order to continue to be consciousness as a whole, had to keep learning, growing, changing, evolving, expanding in order to keep existing. So what does that mean? It needed new information, because the only way we can evolve, grow, learn, change, and expand is to become more complex. And in order to become more complex, we need more information. So consciousness itself needed more information about itself in order to continue to live. It had to change. It had to grow. It had to expand. It had to evolve. So if it already knew itself as unified, which is why we all have that sense that we're supposed to be one, we're all connected. Why is this separation so painful? Because it's outside of what we already knew about ourselves. That's the information the soul comes in with that it already knows beyond experience here. And then we step down into this separation experience because it is the very idea of being in a separate self, being in a separated situation, in separation consciousness, that is expanding consciousness. Consciousness already knew itself all put together. Separation was actually the next evolution of consciousness. Just like when we can look at the body from the outside and see it as a whole, we can understand it peripherally, we can understand it superficially. It's not until we start to take it apart, dissect it, see all the individual parts, that we can actually truly understand how the body works. It is the exact same way with consciousness. Everything that we see in this reality is a piece of the whole that is still intrinsically connected to the whole, that is expressing as an individual part so that we can learn about that part, so that consciousness can continue to experience new things, get new information about itself, learn, grow, evolve, change, and expand and evolve, become more complex. Yes, so we are expanding the universe, expanding God in this separation experience because this is a new experience. So we all come down into this separation, which is not an experience we've had before. So we then are now in this place where we are capable of free will opposition to the law, right? Now that we are not in unity consciousness, we are in separation consciousness, which is to a degree an illusion, right? Like the liver is not actually a separate thing. It's not going to keep living on its own if we take it out of the body. It's an integral part of the body, and the body is integral to it. It's the connection that keeps it going, and it's the connection that keeps the body going. But the liver, we can look at the liver as a separate part and watch how it's functioning within the whole, but take the whole out of it. Yeah, not look at all that. Just look at how the liver is functioning within the whole and get more information about the liver. And then that information about the liver teaches us more about how the body works as a whole. But of course, the liver isn't going to work if we just take it out and see what happens when it's just doing its thing by itself. That nothing's going to happen. It's dead. You see? So we're all connected. We're still all one, but we're having a separation individual experience. This conflicts with what we know about the reality because we've never had that before as consciousness. Okay? So we step down into the separation reality where we can now have the experience of opposing the laws, opposing the structure. In a unified consciousness, we would never oppose the structure because we see the structure as one with ourselves. Here, in the separation experience, we can have all these experiences of opposing the structure. Yes? Opposing what reality is, opposing what truth is. And in that, we are learning more about it. So it's still an expansion experience to have an opposition experience. We are still expanding. We are learning, growing, changing, evolving, and expanding every single time we step outside of the structure of reality that exists. But when we step outside of it, we cause ourselves pain. We break ourselves against the laws of nature and the laws of the universe. That's what causes pain. So our pain and our suffering in this life, okay, the real thing that causes us pain and suffering is labeling pain and suffering as wrong. The truth is that's the point of life for the very majority of us, for most of life. We are here to oppose the law in every single way we possibly can, to learn everything about being an individual who's opposing the laws. So this pain and this suffering that we are in is meant to be. It is expansion. It's not a degradation of consciousness. It's an evolution of consciousness. And we need to start to understand that. Our separation consciousness, where we are opposing the laws of the reality and opposing the laws of ourselves, rejecting reality, rejecting nature, doing all these things that we're doing, causing harm to ourselves and harm to the planet, and not seeing how we're all connected, and not seeing how what we do to ourselves is what we do to others, not seeing what we do to others is what we do to ourselves, not seeing that, our bodies have a way that they work, and if we do things that are out of alignment with that, the body's going to break down, not seeing any of that, that's a part of this. Okay? Now, once we come into awareness of our suffering, this is where things start to get tricky. Because for every step of consciousness that's lower than the level of consciousness of someone who's aware of their suffering and aware that there's a cause of their suffering, they're suffering and they're in pain, but they don't really suffer, right? So like animals don't suffer the way that humans do, because their consciousness is not capable of telling themselves the story that this shouldn't be happening. Okay? So it's as we evolve, and when we get to this place, and that we're getting there as a humanity, where we're just really starting to become aware of our suffering, this is where the self-improvement path happens, right? We become aware of our suffering, and there's wisdom in the fact that it is because we are doing something wrong. Now, wrong is not the right word, but this is how we feel about it, right? We're like, this pain is bad. And technically, bad, again, is not the right word because it's still expanding consciousness, but it's not going with the structure, and therefore will eventually lead to degradation. Okay? We can oppose the structure for a very long time and have that opposition still be life-generating because it's still generating new information. We can be the smoker who lives in middle America, who has black coffee for breakfast and steak for dinner, and live till we're 80, and seemingly be doing the same thing over and over again, but we're not, because of singularity experience in time. It's a new thing every time. It's still life-generating, because it's a new experience. This soul has never had that experience before. They're not going to be aware of their suffering the way that someone else who is more experienced is going to be aware of their suffering. Okay? So when we start to become aware of our suffering, and again, to the point where we feel like there's something we can do about it, that's a new level of wisdom. We are opposing the structure. That's what's hurting. Okay, so once we start to understand this, we can start to say, okay, there's a reason why we all freak out about it. There's a reason why we're all so upset about our weight, upset about our self-sabotaging behavior, upset about all these things and trying to get rid of them. Because we really are seeing them as, this is what's causing my suffering. It's wrong. Get rid of it. Now, where the self-love path comes in is an evolution above this. Okay? Is where we start to see that we cannot get rid of anything. There is no getting rid of anything. Everything is a part of the whole. There's nowhere for anything to go. Okay? We can either align with the laws, bring everything into order and into its proper context. Yes? See that it's just one big puzzle. And we either put the pieces together and see the picture, and then we can expand the picture, or we continue to try to take pieces out to try to make the picture make sense and see that every time we take a piece out, the picture doesn't come together. Okay? This is exactly what we're doing with ourselves. So we get onto the self-love path and we start to get this vision of ourselves, the one who is no longer suffering. And we start to feel what that would feel like. And we start to know what that would be like. And we feel and see and know this person that we're going to become when we're no longer suffering. And we think, okay, that's it. That's nirvana. That's enlightenment. That's health. That's wellness. That's arriving. And we feel what that feels like and we get in that space or whatever. And then all of us at some point have a crash where we come back down and there's some part of us that pulls us from that high, right? That pulls us from that high experience. Our binge eating, our addictions, our gambling, our shitty relationships, the way we eat, the way we think, the way we speak, there's always going to be something that we see, okay, this is the part of myself that's holding me back from being my higher self. You see, we all get there. This is the part of myself that's holding me back from being this. So this part of myself could not be divine. So I must get rid of it. I have to get rid of this self-sabotaging behavior. I have to get rid of this part of myself that is not divine. That's what we're doing on the self-improvement path. So where the self-improvement path becomes the self-love path is where we start to say, wait a minute. This part of myself that I have been labeling as the thing that's wrong with me, my weight, my gambling, my relationships, my eating, my addictions, my anger, my frustration, my ego, my attachments, right? This part of me that's lazy, the part of me that's guilty, the part of me that likes this, the part of me that likes that, the part of me that hates this, the part of me that hates that, the part of me that can't get on board with this thing that I know would be good for me, the part of me that sabotages me every time. We all are in this place where we're saying this is the part that needs to be eradicated. I couldn't love that part. If I were to love that part, this part of me that is clearly the thing that's holding me back from being who I want to be and experiencing the non-suffering version of myself, then I'm going to be stuck in suffering forever. And this is what culture teaches us, right? We've all been taught, because we're all so afraid of individuality, because, again, we're not understanding things, that there's something intrinsic about us that is the cause of the separation, that is the cause of us being cut off from love, that is the cause of us suffering. Because, again, the second foundational misunderstanding that we all have as human beings is that love comes through connection with others, right? But in this separation experience, what we're going to evolve into eventually is seeing that within the separation experience, love only comes from the inside. It's a new thing. It's no longer about being connected to the whole. It's about being connected within. Okay, so we're evolving what we knew before. Before, connection was about being connected to the whole. That's where that came from. There's wisdom in that, but we're evolving it. As a separated consciousness within a whole, if we want to feel connected, It's going to be within. But we're still operating like we're all connected in connection consciousness, which says connection, love, feeling this thing that we want to feel only comes through other people acknowledging me. Okay, so we have that. And then we say, if that's how it is, right, we have to get rid of all the things that make us different. Because to be different is to be disconnected. But in this separation experience, if we're going to evolve it, we're going to see, no, it's actually us embracing what makes us an individual that expands consciousness the most, because we learn the most about the individual part, which feeds all the information back to the consciousness as a whole about itself, right? Every time you line up with who you are as an individual, you actually expand consciousness the most. You show your truest colors, the thing, the fractal of God that you are. You act as the liver. You stop trying to be the kidney, and you stop trying to be the heart, and you stop trying to be the lungs. You just do the liver thing, and in that, you show what the liver does. And then we learn way more about the body. So it's the same thing. So as we start to get on the self-love path, what we're going to realize is that we've been indoctrinated to believe that connection comes from the outside, and that was wisdom because that's how it used to be before we were in the separation experience, and that it is the thing that makes us different that's separating us. And it is this separation that makes us feel so lacking that we can't be happy. And it is not understanding the laws and not understanding how we need to align with them in order to stop suffering, because we now have a free will choice, which we never had anywhere else in the universe, in this separation consciousness, to oppose the laws so that we can learn about them, right? It's that coming back into alignment with them as an individual who has free will choice that the most expansion happens. So this is the path of self-love. You say, okay, that thing that when I'm in this place of idealizing and visualizing or feeling what it would be like to be my high self, I'm not suffering, I'm on a high, I just came from my Kundalini retreat, or I just had a great meditation, or I just, whatever it is that I just did, that it felt like I connected with my highest self, and then I came crashing down. That part of you that caused you to crash down. That part of you that causes you to crash every day, even when you're not high. That part of you that you can very easily identify as being like, this is the part of me that's suffering and in pain. What we need to recognize on the self-love path is that is the part of the self that is holding you back from being your highest self, not because you need to get rid of it, but because it needs love, light, awareness, okay? This is the part of yourself you are not aware of. This is the part of yourself you are not aware of. This is the part of yourself you don't know about. This is what we need to understand, right? If this whole thing is information gathering, which it is, in order to become more order, complex, and structured as a whole, each individual is coming to experience their individual self as something it's never been before. That is why it acts in lower order. It's unintelligent. It's undiscovered. It's not plugged into the whole piece of the puzzle. It is a puzzle piece that is separated and makes no sense by itself. It's chaos by itself. When it's plugged into the puzzle, it makes sense. So, every part of you that is sabotaging you, that holds you back from being your higher self, your anger, your frustration, your rage, your self-sabotaging behaviors, anything you want to say, is a part of God. It is simply a part of God that is yet to be discovered by you and yet to be put into the context of the whole of who and what you are, and then aligned with the laws. Meaning, you have to love that part. There is no part of you. There is no part of anyone. There is no exception to this rule. There is no part that does not simply need love, attention, awareness, to be felt, to be seen, to be heard. As we feel, we experience an awakening of consciousness. As we go into the parts of the self that we have so deeply rejected, and we say, I'm going to make room for you. I want to understand you. Why are you here? What are you doing? That part gets plugged back into the light of consciousness. We learn about it, and it will then start to make sense in the puzzle of who you are, and you will start to become strong enough to express as this, and this is you coming out of suffering. You're not going to get rid of the part of you that's causing you suffering. You're going to realize what that part is. And in so doing, you're going to understand that's the structure of who I am. That's the structure of God. So that's not wrong. I express it in alignment with the universal laws. And as you learn about yourself, because this is how it is in a separation experience, the more we learn about ourselves, the more we learn about the structure in total. Just like every time we learn about the liver, we learn more about the body itself. Every time you learn about yourself, you learn more about the structure. You come more and more into alignment with the structure, you stop suffering because you're no longer opposing the laws, and then you start to expand. There is no exception to the rule. You are not the exception to the rule. Your bad behavior, your thing that you hate about you, is not the exception to the rule. You need to love every aspect of yourself. Radically. That's what this is. You need to understand it is God that's not holding you back from being God. You are holding it back from being God. By rejecting it, not learning about it, not letting it express, not letting it be what it is, you are rejecting its capacity for evolution, and therefore it is devolving. That's why it's killing you. That's why it's hurting you. That's why you don't like it. That's why you're in pain. You're opposing the structure of yourself. And so long as we oppose the structure, we never break a law. We never break the structure. We break ourselves against the structure. So you must embrace the thing you hate about yourself the most as God and learn about it. Integrate it back into the puzzle that you are and watch how it actually enables you to become the person you want to become. You are not going to become that person, the higher, non-suffering version of yourself, without this part. You are only going to become that version of yourself with this part integrated. You understand this part, it's become intelligent, it's added to your intelligence, and then you are your highest self. You already have all the pieces. You're not going to get rid of any of them. So you need to discover all of them. Bring them into the puzzle, bring them into context, bring them into the light. That is how you become your highest self. Your highest self is not the part of you without this behavior. It's the part of you that has evolved that behavior through understanding. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. There is no exception to the rule. You're not the exception to the rule. There's nothing wrong with you. Every single piece of you is God. You're all simply undiscovered parts of God that are opposing structure. And as you start to discover them, it comes back into alignment. Everything gets put together. It's coming together. It's integration. Okay? It's radical. There's no bad part of you. Every part of you is God. It's God having a separation experience, opposing the laws until you become aware enough that you want to stop doing that. And when you realize that, the only place to go is love. Acceptance, embracing, making room. What are you about? Why are you here? How are you serving me? 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 How are you God? Show me that you're God. Okay? So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave those down below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, which I don't know when that'll be, but I hope this is good. All right.